When the pound falls, most people get poorer, but not everyone. Specifically, those who've bet the currency will crash are able to make a tidy profit. It's called short selling, and it's exactly what this man did. This is Crispin O'Day. He's a hedge fund manager who's been betting that government debt would rise and that the pound would fall. As a result, his fund is said to have risen by 145% since the pound started falling. He's also Kwasi Kwarteng's former boss. Before becoming an MP, the Chancellor was an analyst for O'Day's firm, and the two still like to meet up from time to time. The Times reports this. Kwasi Kwarteng had a private lunch during the Tory leadership contest with a hedge fund boss who once employed him. Crispin O'Day, a hedge fund manager who has profited from the fall in the value of the pound and government debt, met Kwarteng at his home in London on July the 17th, when there were still 6 candidates in the running for the Tory leadership. Truss, the candidate who Kwarteng backed, made it on to the final 2 on July the 20th. Now, we're not suggesting that there was any wrongdoing here. At the time of the lunch, Kwarteng wasn't the Chancellor, though he was the Secretary of State for Business, not an entirely irrelevant job, and he came out in support of Truss less than 2 weeks later. But O'Day told the Times this: "We have never discussed anything but the usual gossip of politics. At the time he came for lunch, it was not known who was going to win the leadership, and he wasn't particularly optimistic about getting one of the big 3. So I presume that's a reference to one of the big 3 jobs. He didn't realise he was going to be Chancellor. Now, it's important to note this is not the first time that O'Day has been incredibly lucky betting against the British economy. In 2016, on the night of the Leave vote in the European referendum, he made £220 million in one go when the value of the pound fell. And in 2019, he was criticised for making a £300 million bet against British businesses, including Royal Mail. Also in 2019, former Chancellor Philip Hammond accused Boris Johnson, who was threatening a no-deal Brexit, of being in hock to millionaire investors betting against the UK. O'Day was widely thought to be amongst them. So Hammond wrote this: "Johnson is backed by speculators who have bet billions on a hard Brexit, and there is only one outcome that works for them: a crash-out no-deal Brexit that sends the currency tumbling and inflation soaring. So they at least will be reassured to see no evidence at all that his government has seriously pursued a deliverable deal." In other words, if the UK crashed out of Europe, Johnson's millionaire backers, including O'Day, stood to profit big time. O'Day described the claims as absolute rubbish, but he is a pretty big Tory donor. Over the past decade, his firm is reported to have given more than £1.7 million to the Conservative Party. He personally channeled £870,000 to various pro-Brexit groups, and he donated £10,000 to Johnson's leadership build, as well as £22,000 to Jacob Rees-Mogg. So what did he think of this week's crash in the value of sterling? He described it in the Financial Times as the gift that keeps on giving. Maurice, I want your take on this. There's lots of, do we call them a conspiracy theory? Anyway, theorising, let's say. I think it's a bit much to call them a conspiracy theory, really. It's not completely implausible. Do you think that it's possible that Kwasi Kwarteng crashed the pound on purpose because a bunch of his friends have bet against the pound and they can get filthy rich if the pound goes down? Does that sound remotely plausible to you as an explanation for what's happened over the past week?
To be honest, no, but I can see why people would think that. I mean, it would be quite a rock star move. You know, become Chancellor, crash the economy, make billions, and whistle off into the sunset. That's gangster. But I don't think he's done this. Now what I'm fairly certain. You know, who knows? We're not at these private dinners where they only talk about the minutiae of politics. They don't get into money at all because they're not like that. These guys just chuck loads of money at individuals and the Tory party and whatever because they just like them. I'm sure that's the case. It seems really unthinkable that maybe not he has not done it on purpose, but he certainly discussed what he was thinking. He's certainly given information to his friend or his former boss or whatever, and then the friend or former boss has sort of gambled on that, and lo and behold has come out a winner while we all lose. At the very least, it's a really horrible look. It's a really the idea that there's sort of people dancing around while others go to food banks and starve and lose their homes and all the things that that are going to come about from this. Again, I always think there's so many things that happen that you think, all right, okay, the country won't stand for this. We bail out the bankers and then had 10 years of pain. I think, okay, well, we won't go for it again. But I think we're just we must be the sort of nicest, most accommodating nation ever. Because some of these things in other countries, you'd imagine people would be run out of town. You shouldn't be making what's 145% profit on our economy collapsing. Yeah, something smells, but I don't want to point more of a finger than would be fair.
I mean, especially if you're friends with the Chancellor. I think, yeah, I do quite like the idea that Kwasi Kwarteng, this whole thing, that the whole career in politics was to ultimately become Chancellor, to crash the pound, make loads of money, then go move to Hollywood or something. It's like, I can get a nicer flat than Rishi Sunak. Everyone's talking about how wealthy he is. I can beat this guy. It's probably not the most plausible explanation for what's going on. The analysis I have heard, which I do find fairly persuasive, is that what this shows us is the kind of circles these people move in. And you can imagine if you're moving in these circles where you're in international finance, you're very mobile, you're betting against this currency, you're betting against that currency, and give you a very cavalier attitude to these kind of things. So obviously, if you're someone who would never dream of betting on currency, you see these things not as this sort of exciting gamble, but you see this as a risk to your livelihood. If you're in this world of betting against this currency and betting against that currency, you can sort of imagine a kind of testosterone-fueled meeting where they're like, fuck it, let's do it. Let's take a gamble in the markets, and what's the worst that can happen? Might be a problem for our political career, but then we can go get a different career in the city. I feel like the stakes are not that high for the people who are currently in Number 10 Downing Street and who are currently in the Treasury, and that might be why they're taking such bizarre risks.